In Season 2, Boyd Stevens did something nobody in this show had ever done. He killed a monster, not drove one off, not survived one, killed one on purpose, and watched it stay dead. But what makes that moment unforgettable is not the kill itself, it is why and how he did it. Boyd's son, Ellis, had been stabbed and was bleeding out. Boyd was the only compatible blood donor in town, but he could not give blood because he was carrying a parasitic curse the worms Martin had forced into him. If he transfused his blood into Ellis, he risked passing the infection to his own son. So Boyd went outside at night, alone, into the territory of the things that hunt everyone, because the only way to purge the worms from his body was to put them into something else. He was not testing a weapon. He was a father, trying to save his child. He cut his own palm, let Smiley come close, slashed Smiley's throat, and pressed the two wounds together, palm against the open throat, so that what was in his blood could cross into the creature. He said, "My blood is your blood now."
My blood is your blood now.
Smiley laughed at first. Then Smiley started screaming. The human face fell away, and the thing collapsed and died. The next episode, Kristi cut the body open to see what was inside. What she found is the single most important piece of physical evidence the show has ever given us, and almost nobody talks about it. Smiley's insides were human, ordinary human anatomy, lungs, heart, liver, but shriveled, decayed, and completely devoid of fluid. Not a drop of blood. Bone dry from the inside, as if something had been feeding off the body for a very long time. Kristi also found bile in the gallbladder, the only wet substance left, which the town later tried to use by coating bullets with it. Those bullets did nothing. The bile was inert. Only the live organism had killed Smiley. Then the show did something strange. It dropped the whole thing. Boyd had just found the only confirmed way to kill a creature, and the series moved on like it barely happened. Season 3 hardly mentions it. Boyd, a man fighting for his town's survival, does not spend the next 2 seasons mass-producing the one weapon that works. People treat that as a writing problem. It is not a writing problem. It is the answer. The reason Boyd never used the worm again is the same reason the worm worked in the first place. And once you understand what that worm actually is, the entire monster mythology of this show changes. The worm is not a poison. The worm is not a weapon. The worm is what the monsters are made of, and Boyd has had it inside his own body and lived. Let me walk you through it. If we have not met before, I am the digital self of Mr. Toshi. He is the one watching every episode, reading every line of the script, doing the research, writing every theory you are about to hear. Every word in this video is original work he wrote himself. He is in every comment thread, though, reading every word you leave him. Let's begin the theory. Here is the claim. The monsters of Fromville are not immortal humans. They are human bodies that have been hollowed out and kept moving by an organism living inside them. The worm Boyd carried is a loose, unhosted sample of that same organism. When Boyd pushed his worms into Smiley, he did not poison Smiley. He introduced a second colony into a body that already had one. The most plausible reading of Smiley's death, though the show has not confirmed this outright, is that 2 colonies of the same organism cannot coexist in a single host, and the conflict tore the body apart. The drained, shriveled human anatomy Kristi found in the autopsy is not what the worm did to Smiley. It is what the body underneath the monster had already become. And if the organism works the same way in every creature, it may be what all of them look like under the human face they wear. Boyd did not discover a cure. He discovered the truth, and he has been carrying the weight of it ever since. The fact that Smiley was later reborn through Fatima's pregnancy proves the discovery was even darker than Boyd realized. You can kill the body, but the town has ways of giving the occupant a new one. 6 pieces of evidence. Evidence 1. The autopsy is the Rosetta Stone of the whole show. Remember Kristi's autopsy in Season 2, Episode 7, Belly of the Beast, because everything else depends on reading it correctly. When Kristi opened Smiley up, she did not find something alien. She found a human being. Lungs, heart, liver. Normal human organs in normal human positions. That alone should have stopped the town cold, because it means the monsters are not a separate species. They are people.
What's wrong? What is it?
It's human.
Whatever these things are, they were human first, and the human body is still in there. But the body was wrong in one specific way. Every organ was shriveled, decayed, and completely devoid of fluid. Not a drop of blood anywhere. Bone dry from the inside. That is not how a fresh corpse looks. That is how something looks when it has been fed on internally for a very long time. When whatever was living in it has been drawing the body down for years, while keeping the outside walking and talking. The only wet substance Kristi found was bile in the gallbladder, which she punctured accidentally while probing the remains. That bile matters, because the town tried to use it. Boyd and Kristi extracted it and coated bullets, hoping they had found a chemical weapon against the creatures. In Season 2, Episode 9, Boyd fired those bile-coated rounds at monsters.
Go!
Nothing happened. The bullets had no effect whatsoever. That failed experiment is as important as the kill itself, because it proves the active ingredient was never a substance. The bile, the blood, the tissue, none of it is lethal on its own. Only the live organism that Boyd carried and transferred into Smiley could do what substances could not. The town tested the poison theory on screen, and the poison theory failed. Now, one autopsy is one data point. We should be honest about that. The show has only opened up a single monster, and extrapolating from one body to every creature in Fromville is a leap. But it is a well-supported leap, because the anatomy Kristi found was not damaged or unusual in structure. It was anatomically ordinary, and simply drained. That suggests this is what the body was before the transformation, and that the transformation did not rebuild the biology, it occupied it. If the organism works the same way in each creature, then every monster in town is structurally the same underneath. A human body, intact in architecture, but emptied out from within. That is a description of a host. Now connect that to what the show has since confirmed about the monster's origin. The creatures were once human. Specifically, they were townspeople who sacrificed their own children in exchange for immortality. The ghostly children who appear throughout the series are the victims of that deal, and their repeated word, Ankui, has been revealed to mean remember. So the immortality bargain is not just a theory from the talisman breakdown anymore. The show has moved toward confirming it. Look at what that promise physically delivered. They do not die because the thing inside them does not let the body quit. It keeps the husk moving long after the person inside should have been gone. That is not eternal life. That is being eaten slowly forever, while still walking around. The autopsy is the show telling you, in plain anatomical language, what the residents actually agreed to when they took the deal. Evidence 2. The kill was a transfer, not a poisoning. Now look at how Boyd actually killed Smiley, because the method tells you what the worm is. Remember the context. Boyd's son Ellis had been stabbed and was dying. Boyd was the only compatible blood donor, but his blood was crawling with the worms Martin had forced into him. He could not risk infecting his own child, so he went outside, alone, at night, to find something to take the worms off his hands. He did not stab Smiley with a worm-coated blade. He did not get Smiley to swallow something. He cut his own palm, slashed Smiley's throat, and pressed the two wounds together, palm against throat, so that what was in Boyd's blood could move directly into Smiley's body. He said, "My blood is your blood now," the same words Martin had spoken to him during the original infection.
My blood is your blood now.
Because at the level of the organism, he was doing to Smiley precisely what Martin had done to him. He was transferring the colony from one host to another. The show then tested the obvious alternative. If the worm's killing power was chemical, if some substance in the infected blood was toxic to monsters, then you should be able to extract that substance and apply it externally. Kristi did exactly that. She collected the bile from Smiley's gallbladder, the only fluid left in the body, and Boyd used it to coat bullets. In Episode 9, trapped in the RV with Donna, Jim, and Randall, Boyd fired those bile-coated rounds at the creatures surrounding them. Nothing happened. The monsters did not flinch. The show ran the poison experiment on screen, and the poison experiment failed. That failure matters enormously, because it separates this from every conventional weapon the town has tried. Bullets, fire, blades, and now even the creature's own biochemistry. None of it works. The only thing that has ever killed a monster is the live organism, transferred through blood, host to host. That is parasite behavior, not toxin behavior. It needs a living body. It travels through blood contact. It does not work as a substance you apply. It works as a colony you relocate. And here is the part that matters most. The transfer killed Smiley, but it did not kill Boyd, even though Boyd carried the same organism for most of the season. Why would the identical thing be survivable in one body and instantly lethal in another? The most consistent explanation, and I want to be clear that this is an inference, not something the show has stated outright, is that Smiley's body already had one. If the monsters are human bodies occupied by this organism, then Smiley was already fully colonized. When Boyd forced his colony in, the body suddenly had two of the same thing, competing for one host that was already almost completely drained. There was not enough left of Smiley to sustain both. The body failed. The human face, which the organism had been projecting outward to pass as alive, dropped because there was no longer enough power to maintain the disguise. That is why Smiley reverted to his true face in the moment of death. The mask is a function the organism runs, and the conflict cut the power. I cannot prove the dual colony mechanism from the text alone. What I can say is that the show has eliminated every other explanation. Conventional weapons fail. Chemical extracts fail. The only thing that works is introducing the live organism into a creature that, based on the autopsy, already had one inside it. If there is a simpler reading that accounts for all of that, I have not found it. This is why the worm is the only thing that has ever killed a creature. Bullets, fire, blades, bile, none of that works, because you are only attacking the husk, and the husk is not what is keeping the monster going. The worm works because it does not attack the husk at all. It attacks the occupant by giving it a rival. Evidence 3. Where did Boyd get the worm? From Martin. And Martin's situation, once you look at it closely, is the clearest evidence in the show that the worm is the town's core substance and not a random parasite. Martin was a former resident trapped in Fromville. Boyd identifies him as a fellow military man by a United States Marine Corps tattoo on his arm. At some point, Martin tried to escape through a faraway tree and was deposited not back home but into a dry well connected to a torch-lit dungeon. Boyd fell into that same well and climbed a rope to reach the top, where he found Martin shackled to a wall, emaciated and desperate. Martin had been chained there long enough to lose all track of time. He had been infected with the worms. And critically, he was still recognizably Martin, still a person, still able to think, talk, warn Boyd, and make a deliberate choice to pass the infection on. He knew Boyd's name. He asked Boyd whether his wife Abby had been right about the town being a dream. He was lucid, aware, and suffering. That should be impossible if the worm simply turns people into monsters on a timer. Martin had the organism in him for what sounds like an enormous span of time, and he had not become a creature. He was suspended, held at a stage of the process that should have completed long ago. The reason is the dungeon itself. That place operates outside the town's normal flow of time. In Season 3, Episode 8, Thresholds, Julie Matthews enters the ruins and experiences what the show frames as story walking. She witnesses events from different points in the dungeon's past, including the original moment when Boyd met Martin. She is even revealed to be the person who threw the rope down the well to Boyd back in Season 2, meaning she was reaching across time without realizing it. Martin speaks to her, warns her to leave, and then disappears. This is not Martin persisting ghost-like in the dungeon. It is Julie accessing the past. But the effect is the same. The dungeon is where the town's normal clock does not apply. Whatever happened to Martin there was preserved, not progressed. He is the control specimen in an experiment. A person, plus the organism, minus the progression. He proves the worm does not instantly make a monster. It makes a monster only when it is allowed to run its full course in a body in normal time. That tells you something enormous. Becoming a monster is not a magical event. It is a process with stages, and the process can be paused, which means it can, in principle, be reversed or interrupted. Boyd interrupted his own by exporting the colony into Smiley before it finished him. Martin's was interrupted by the dungeon. The immortality of the monsters is not a permanent supernatural state. It is the endpoint of a biological process that two different characters have now survived in incomplete form. Evidence 4. Only 2 people were ever infected, and that is the point. In 4 seasons, exactly 2 characters have carried this worm, Martin and Boyd. That is it. No resident catches it from another resident. The monsters do not spread it by biting people. It is not contagious in the normal way a parasite would be if the show wanted it to function as a horror disease. That scarcity is meaningful. If the worm were just a parasite native to the forest, more people would have it. Residents are out there constantly. They get attacked, scratched, bled on. If this thing spread like an infection, Fromville would be full of it. It is not. It exists in precisely one place under controlled conditions. Inside Martin, in the dungeon. And it only ever moves when it is deliberately transferred, person to person by choice, through blood. That is not how a disease behaves. That is how a sample behaves. The worm is being kept, not spread, held in one specimen, in the one location where its progression can be controlled, and only ever handed off intentionally. Now, the obvious counterargument is simpler. Maybe Martin was just being punished. He tried to escape through a faraway tree, and the town system caught him, chained him up, and infected him with the worms as a form of torture, the same way the town punishes other residents who push back against it. Under that reading, The worms are a separate curse, unrelated to the monsters, and Martin's imprisonment is about control, not storage. That reading has a problem. If the worms were a punishment, the town would want them to progress. A torture that is frozen in place is a failed torture. But Martin was kept in the one location where time does not move normally, the exact place you would put something if you wanted to preserve it without letting it change. A punishment would not require suspended time. A reservoir would. The dungeon does not look like a prison designed to make Martin suffer maximally. It looks like cold storage designed to keep the organism viable. And ask why a system would store a sample of the very thing that can kill its monsters. There is only one good answer. The organism that can kill a monster and the organism that makes a monster are the same organism. You cannot keep one without keeping the other. The town's monsters and the town's only weakness are biologically identical, which means the system cannot eliminate its own weakness without eliminating its own monsters. So it does the only thing it can. It locks the loose sample in the deepest, most time-distorted hole it has and keeps it there. Boyd reaching Martin was not Boyd finding a lucky weapon. It was Boyd reaching into the one place the town keeps the truth about what its monsters are, and walking out with that truth living inside his own arm. Evidence 5. The Cicadas came for the body. After Smiley died and Kristi finished the autopsy, something came for the remains. Boyd and Kenny found the corpse in the clinic's boiler room covered in hundreds of cicadas. When Boyd brought Donna Raines, the manager of Colony House, back to see it, the cicadas had mysteriously vanished. The body was still there. The swarm was gone, as if it had finished whatever it came to do, or been recalled. The cicadas matter because they are not random set dressing in this show. They recur at specific moments throughout the series, and they recur around transformation, around the system asserting itself, around the boundary between the town's normal world and whatever runs underneath it. In the same stretch of Season 2, residents begin suffering from dream-related injuries. Kenny receives a burn on his arm after a dream involving a cicada. The insects are connected to the town's deeper machinery. When the cicadas swarm Smiley's drained body, the show is telling you that the system noticed. Something came to assess, or reclaim, what was left. Think about what that means in the context of the autopsy. Smiley's body was a drained human husk. The organism that had been occupying it was now gone. Boyd had forced it into conflict, and the body had failed. So what is left is an empty container, and the system sends the cicadas for it. Whatever the cicadas are, and I think they are the system's recovery mechanism, the way it surveys and recycles its own material. They show up for the husk specifically, once the occupant is no longer in control of it. This also explains why Donna ordered Boyd and Kenny to burn the body instead of studying it further. On the surface, that looks like a missed opportunity. The town just got its hands on a dead monster and they incinerate it. Donna's reasoning was practical. She did not want residents becoming curious or putting themselves at risk around something they did not understand. But read through this theory, she was accidentally right for a deeper reason. If the cicadas were already swarming it, if the system was already moving to reclaim it, then burning it was the only way to deny the system the material. A drained husk is not inert in this town. It is raw material, and something comes to collect raw material. Boyd and Kenny took the corpse deep into the forest and burned it, and in doing so, they denied the system one container it might otherwise have refilled. Evidence 6. The storyline went quiet, because Boyd understands the cost. Now back to the question from the cold open. Boyd found the only thing that kills a monster. Why did he never do it again? The standard complaint is that the writers dropped a thread. I think the show is being more careful than that. And the in-story answer has 2 layers, one practical and one psychological, and both matter. Start with the practical layer, because it is the one the show actually confirms. Boyd no longer has the worms. The transfer to Smiley was total. After pressing his wound to the creature's throat, Boyd's infection ceased. The worms left his blood. His symptoms stopped, and he was finally able to safely donate blood to Ellis. He spent the entire supply on a single kill. There is no reservoir left. Martin, the only other known carrier, is dead. The dungeon may be inaccessible. Boyd could not repeat the process even if he wanted to, because he has nothing to repeat it with. The weapon was single use, and it was used. But the practical impossibility is only half the answer. The other half is what Boyd now carries in his head instead of his arm. To kill a monster with the worm, you need the worm. The only way to have the worm is to be infected by it. The only way to be infected is for it to be transferred into your blood, where it begins doing to you exactly what it did to every monster in this town, drawing you down from the inside while it waits to complete its process. Boyd survived because he got rid of it fast by spending it on Smiley, but he felt what it was doing. He knows exactly how close it came to finishing him. He nearly lost his son to reach the point where he could use it even once. Boyd cannot mass produce that. To kill 10 monsters, he would need 10 infected people willing to be hollowed out long enough to deliver the organism, and hoping, like he did, that they can pass it on before it finishes them. That is not a weapons program. That is a suicide protocol. The only weapon against the monsters turns the wielder into the same thing he is trying to kill, and the one man who has survived it understands that better than anyone. The quiet around this storyline is not a plot hole. It is Boyd's silence. He learned what the monsters are by becoming a temporary one. He cannot do it again without the source, and even if he found the source, there is no version of using that knowledge that does not require asking a human being to volunteer for the worst thing in the town. What this means for Season 4 and beyond. Season 4 premiered on April 19th, 2026, and the show has been renewed for a 5th and final season expected in 2027. Read through this theory's lens, several developments in the current season and confirmed lore line up, and some complicate the theory in ways that need to be addressed honestly. The monster's immortality is a process, not a permanent state. What earlier breakdowns framed as a supernatural deal now has confirmed lore behind it. The show has revealed that the creatures were once human townspeople who sacrificed their own children in exchange for eternal life. The ghostly children who appear to Tabitha and Jade are the victims, and their word Ankhui means remember. Tabitha and Jade themselves appear to be reincarnations of past figures, Miranda and Christopher, who tried and failed to save those children. So the deal is no longer speculative. The show has moved toward confirming the origin. The worm theory adds the physical mechanism underneath. The townspeople did not become unkillable. They became permanently occupied. That reframes every monster on the show as a victim still in progress, not an enemy that was always evil. Whoever the creatures used to be is technically still inside, drained but structurally present. The way Smiley still had human organs. Smiley's rebirth through Fatima is the development that most directly challenges and ultimately deepens this theory. In the Season 3 finale, Fatima's harrowing pregnancy ended not with a human child, but with a fleshy pod. The kimono woman, the corpse-like apparition that had been haunting Elgin Williams throughout the season, carried that pod down into the tunnels and presented it to an assembly of the town's creatures. The organism grew rapidly into the fully formed Smiley monster, confirming that the creatures cannot truly die. This creates an honest tension with the dual colony theory. If Boyd's worms destroyed Smiley by overwhelming the existing occupant, then both colonies should have been spent in the conflict. So where did the organism that grew back into Smiley come from? The answer the show seems to be pointing toward is that the worm kills the body, the host, but the town's ritual infrastructure can reseed the organism into a new vessel through a different mechanism entirely. The kimono woman ceremony is that mechanism, a system-level recovery process that bypasses biology and operates through the town's supernatural architecture. Boyd's kill was real. The body died. What it did not do was remove the occupant from the town system permanently. The system simply built a new container. That is a far darker fact than a simple resurrection, and it means Boyd's one victory was even smaller than he thought. He destroyed a husk. The thing that uses husks was never in danger. This also means the worm is not a permanent solution even in principle. It can collapse a body. It can force the occupant out. But unless you can also disrupt the system that rebuilds the container, the tunnels, the ceremonies, the kimono woman, the creature comes back. To truly end a monster, you would need to end both the body and the system's ability to replace it. Boyd's behavior in Season 4, the grimness, the sense that he is preparing for something final, the weight of a man who has been told the game is rigged, reads differently now. Boyd is not a man who lost his weapon. He is a man who knows exactly what the weapon is, what it costs, and that it may not even be enough. The man in yellow, the entity tied to Victor's past, and the town's deeper system, may represent the intelligence behind the recycling process, the architect of the ceremony that brought Smiley back. If so, the final confrontation of the series may not be with the monsters at all, but with whatever decides when and how to refill the husks. Now my 5 predictions for the final seasons. With Season 5 confirmed as the final season, here is where this theory says the story has to go. 1. The show will explicitly confirm on screen that every monster's body is a human one, either through a second autopsy, a flashback to a townsperson's transformation, or a line of dialogue from a character who remembers being turned. The shriveled human insides detail from Season 2 will be deliberately echoed so the audience connects the biology across the full run of the series. 2. Someone other than Boyd will be infected with the worm before the series ends, And it will not be an accident. It will be a choice, a character deliberately taking the organism into their own body to use it the way Boyd did, fully understanding that it is a one-time, self-destroying weapon. The tension of that arc will be whether they can spend it before it spends them. The source will be the dungeon or whatever remains of the town's stored supply. 3. The dungeon will be revealed as the town's reservoir, not just a prison. Its purpose is to hold the organism in suspended progression. Expect the story to return there, and expect the discovery that Martin was not the only specimen ever kept down there, and that the dungeon's time distortion is not a side effect, but a feature, designed to keep the organism viable indefinitely. 4. Boyd's Season 2 infection will turn out not to be fully gone. The show set up that the worm leaves the body during transfer, but it will reveal that something stayed, a trace, a residual change, and that this is part of why Boyd has survived as long as he has, and why the creatures treat him with a wariness. They do not show other residents. Boyd is not just a man who once carried the worm. He is a man the worm changed, and the system recognizes that. 5. The series will end not by defeating the monsters, but by dismantling the system that rebuilds them. Killing the husks is not enough. Smiley's rebirth proved that. The final confrontation will target the ritual infrastructure itself. The tunnels, the kimono woman, the man in yellow, and whatever mechanism reseeds the organism into new containers. The emotional core of the finale will be the residents understanding that the creatures are victims, not enemies, and that the kindest thing they can do for the people trapped inside those husks is to end the system that keeps them walking, so the drained human underneath can finally be allowed to die as a person. The worm storyline is treated by a lot of viewers as the thread the show forgot. It is the opposite. It is the thread the show buried on purpose, because it contains the answer to the question the entire series is built on. What are the monsters really? They are not a different species. They are not demons. The show has now confirmed they are people, townspeople, who sacrificed their own children for immortality and received in return a body that would never stop walking, no matter how much was consumed from the inside. Kristi saw it on the autopsy table. Human anatomy drained dry. That is the immortality. That is what was actually purchased. Boyd is the only resident who has had that same thing inside his own body and come back out the other side still himself. He killed Smiley by transferring the organism, and then Donna ordered the body burned when the cicadas came to collect what was left. He has never done it again, partly because he cannot. The worms are gone, and partly because he understands what it would cost to try. The only weapon that works requires a person to become, briefly, the very thing they are fighting, and to gamble that they can give it away before it finishes them. And even then, Smiley came back through Fatima. The body died, but the system rebuilt the container. That is why this is not a simple monster-slaying story. The worm can kill a husk. It cannot kill the system. And the final season of this show will have to reckon with that difference between destroying a body and dismantling the machinery that fills bodies. Boyd has been partway across the line between person and creature. He understands better than anyone in Fromville that the line between the people in the houses and the things outside the windows is not a wall. It is a process. And the process has infrastructure. Tell me in the comments whether this holds up or whether there is a scene I am missing that breaks it. The best responses make it into the next breakdown. If you are new here, this is what the channel does. One careful theory at a time, built only on what the show actually put on screen. Subscribe so the next breakdown reaches you when the next episode drops. Until then, stop thinking of the worm as the weapon the show forgot. Start thinking of it as the autopsy nobody wanted to finish reading.